Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February NATS Chat 2023. I'm Kari Ragan, the moderator and host of NATS Chats, which are sponsored by Inside View Press. And I am so thrilled to welcome my guest tonight to speak about the embodied thought, movement to free the voice. So welcome, Elizabeth, Matt, Marieke, and Frank. Thank you so much for being here tonight. One of the things that I find so interesting about our field that's changed, I've been teaching 40 years, so it's been a while. It's so different to see how we really get to specialize now. We can, there are things we all have to know as voice teachers, right? But we also get to find something that really lights a fire under us. So I love this idea of that movement is for you guys, something that really has helped change your teaching, and I look forward to hearing about that tonight. Elizabeth, let's start with you, who is the co-author of Singing with Your Whole Self, A Singer's Guide to the Feldenkrais Awareness, Thought Through Movement. And I would love for you to do a little introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, and if you wouldn't mind holding up your book for those who would like to purchase it.
Here it is.
Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Yes, sure. Matt also has a book there that is published by Rowman and Littlefield, our publisher. So you want to sing with awareness, and I do have a chapter in that book along with my co-author, Sam Nelson. I am not a Feldenkrais practitioner. I always lead off with that because that's a very specific training. It's exhaustive, extensive, and it's directly in the line of what Moshe Feldenkrais taught. I am a voice teacher who hangs out with Feldenkrais practitioners and have for the last 35 years. So when I do Feldenkrais, it's in the context of a voice teacher applying what we have presented in our book, which is it's a cookbook. You make a cake, you do a recipe, you get a cake. You follow the instructions in the book on a particular awareness through movement lesson. You'll find some Feldenkrais work being done. My background, I won't go into a lot of it, but I'm currently teaching at Alfred University here in Western New York State. I came up from Virginia, where I taught at Shenandoah University for 5 years. And before that, a number of other colleges I don't need to go into right now. Oh, and my doctorate in music education, doctor in musical performance is from Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York.
Okay, thank you. Matt, would you go second, just introducing yourself at this point, and we'll come back to the book.
Sure, my name is Matthew Hoch. I did my education at 𝗧liche College, the Hart School, and did my DMA at the New England Conservatory. I'm just finishing up my 18th year in higher ed. I taught for 6 years at Shorter College, later university, from 2006 to 2012, and I've been at Auburn University in Alabama since 2012. I'm primarily known to the NATS community through my scholarship and service. I've edited the So You Want to Sing series. I'm associate editor of the Voice Pedagogy column for the Journal of Singing, and we recently started a NATS Books initiative with Rowman and Littlefield, and I'm chair of the editorial board for that.
Thank you, Matt. Marieke.
Yes, hi. Let's see, where are we starting? I am an Alexander Technique teacher. With Alexander Technique International, I am also an Andover educator with body mapping. I have that certification. I'm working backwards, right? And I have a Master of Fine Arts in Voice Performance. And I've been a voice teacher for about 30 years. And for the last 10, 15 years, I've been also an Andover educator and an Alexander Technique teacher. So I've been experimenting a lot with combining these fields and crafting new ways to approach singers. And no books yet, guys. Maybe it's still coming. Still in the experimental stage. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. Frank, welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I did my education, my master's at 𝗚liche School of Music and my doctorate at the University of Miami. And that's where I teach right now. I've been here since 2016. I'm the chair of the voice department, which is the classical area. And before that, I taught at Oklahoma City University and some others before then. And yeah, I'm just really excited to share kind of what I've been doing with Laban.
I love that. Well, and honestly, this chat came about because my friendship with Frank, and I've watched him do the presentation for Laban a few times now, and I was so inspired by that. And so I thought, let's bring together other practitioners to discuss this. So Elizabeth, let's come back around to you and pretend I know nothing about Feldenkrais, which is really mostly true, and just provide me a bit of an introduction.
Can I tell a personal anecdote story of how I stumbled into Feldenkrais? Okay. Briefly, I come from a family in which education, music, and sports were very, very important. So I grew up in an athletic family. I was a competitive equestrian, a competitive skier, and a competitive swimmer, and played a lot of team sports, continuing right on into my late 20s. So the body and athleticism was really instilled in me from a very tiny little girl age. When I was at Eastman, just starting my doctoral degree in 1988, I was a mess. I was this uptight, tense mother of 2 little boys under 5, full-time doctoral student, had a huge voice studio of my own, performing with Opera Theater of Rochester, also with a 𝗚𝘂𝗲𝘀 troupe, had a church job on the weekends, a husband, a mortgage, and a house just outside of the city. So I went to a lesson with my teacher at the time, 𝗚R𝘂𝗲𝗀𝘀, very, very clearly remember it, early in the fall of 1988. And in the middle of the lesson, she said, "Betsy, you really could use some Feldenkrais work. There's a new guy here who just moved to town, and Eastman has hired him to give a workshop every Sunday evening, and you need to sign up and go to it." So who was I to argue with 𝗚R𝘂𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀? So I did go to the student affairs office. There was a sign-up sheet just outside the door on the bulletin board. It was full, 25 limits, full. I did not live on campus. I didn't live in the student dorms. I was at Eastman when I had classes and lessons and whatnot. But the rest of the time I was doing all that other wacko, crazy, stressed out mid-30s life. So I didn't go to the first class. I came back to the next lesson and 𝗚R𝘂𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀 said, "So how was the Feldenkrais?" I said, "Well, I didn't get to go because I couldn't get in." She said, "You march right down there and you sit under the door and you wait until the next sign-up sheet comes out and you sign your name." So I did, and I was the first one on it. Went to the class, and I remember it clearly because I think I was the only singer. The rest were pianists and instrumentalists from the orchestra. I had a freshman clarinet major lying next to me, and we did this thing on the floor, which I now know what lesson it is. And we're doing this, and we're doing that, and we're doing this. I go, okay, this is really kind of weird. And I sat up after the 45-minute awareness through movement lesson, and the girl next to me looks at me, she goes, "Oh my God, all your wrinkles are gone." And I was, what? So I ran to the ladies' room and I looked in the mirror and it was right. All the stress wrinkles were totally gone. I said, "What is this magical stuff?" Well, it turned out I was in the Gilbert and Sullivan review group with the Off-Monroe Players. They were just doing the Gondoliers, and I was with the troupe, the Duke and Duchess of Plaza Toro. I was playing 𝗚𝘂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, and they do their own rehearsals. And then the chorus comes in and they do all the gondolieri and that sort of thing. As I was walking out the door, I saw Sam Nelson coming towards me. And I said, "You're the Feldenkrais guy." And he said, "Yeah, and I need a voice teacher." And so we got together the next week. And after about 2 weeks of working together, I said, "Sam, we have a paper." And after another week or two, I said, "Sam, we have a book." So that's how I stumbled into Feldenkrais work. Is that good enough, or do you want me to continue?
Sorry, I muted myself because I'm being told that for some reason I'm distorting tonight, which I've never had that problem. So
I
I
see
was
this
muting
happen
myself.
all the time. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Yes, so Elizabeth, do you feel like, so is there anything specific about the Feldenkrais? Like, what would you say about that specific modality besides that
Well,
it helped with fine lines and wrinkles?
well, no, it actually, what it is the Feldenkrais method. It actually reprograms the computer of the brain, is how Sam has told it to me. And I actually am going to read something because I don't have the nifty definitions at my fingertips all the time. It reorganizes your neurological connections and allows you to break down subtle barriers, resulting in an almost magical adjustment that truly frees the singer and the voice. It's a self-discovery process using movement. The movements are simple, gentle, pleasant, exploratory, and fun. So a lot of play goes involved with it. It's not exercise. People always say, oh, I love those Feldenkrais exercises. Moshe Feldenkrais, who was a physicist and a judo, the first European to earn a black belt in judo, he always emphasized the fact that these were called awareness through movement lessons because your body is learning, and it returns to the learning of a little child when babies are first learning to lift their heads and look around, turn themselves over, finally sort of get up and wobble, and then start to crawl. All those learning physiologies and neurologies, we rediscover them with the Feldenkrais method, is how I would put it. I've used it in lessons, one-on-one lessons, teach it in classes with choruses. It's very multi-dimensional. So
I love that you're talking about play, Elizabeth, because we're hearing a lot, especially in independent studio teaching in particular, about incorporating more play into voice lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that you identified that that's an aspect of Feldenkrais. I did not know that. So that's
Definitely.
very interesting.
Yep.
And play at any age, even as an adult, we could spend more time in our kid self playing, so that's wonderful to know about that. Good. I'll be eager to ask more specific questions about it later. Marieke, would you like to share a little bit about the Alexander technique?
Yeah, so FM Alexander was born and grew up in Australia, and he was a Shakespearean actor, and he would recite, and over time he started to lose his voice while he was reciting. And so he went to a doctor, and the doctor said, well, just stop talking. So he'd stop talking, he'd go on voice rest, and his voice would get better, and then he would start reciting again, and he would lose his voice again, and he'd go back to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, just stop talking. And so this went around a few rounds, and he started trying to figure out why, and for himself, why was he losing his voice? And so he didn't have video, so he put mirrors all the way around himself, and he tried to watch himself while he was getting ready to speak. And what he found was that as soon as he was getting ready to speak, he pulled his head back and down just a little bit. And that then compromised his breathing and the vocal tract and all the things we know today. Keep in mind that this was back in the 1920s that he started experimenting with this. And so he started trying to fix that. He goes, well, okay, if when I start to sing, I go back and down, I'll just think forward and up. So he started trying to think forward and up with his head as he started to speak. And he still found himself having trouble. So then he said, well, why is this? And he watched himself very, very carefully over a long period of time. Again, no videos would have been helpful. And discovered that no matter how much he thought forward and up, as soon as he went to actually speak, the old habit and pattern within his system caused him to go back and down once again. So then he said, and this is before anything that we know about neurobiology now, we have so much more information at our disposal. So he worked for a long time trying to figure out what messages to give himself and how to untrain the old habit and how to retrain into something new. And it's the how of that. And I think that even in today's modern time, with all the other things and disciplines and ways to explore movement and thought, I think the how is what the Alexander technique still contributes to the conversation. And
The how.
The how, yeah, the how. How do you get from one habit of movement to another habit of movement? When the one habit of movement, if you don't think about it, you're automatically going to go there because your neurobiological system is geared in that direction. That's what you've always done. That's what feels right. That's what kinesthetically feels normal. So then you go, so how do I break that? How do I change that into something new? And of course, Alexander technique uses a lot of hands-on. And to a lot of people, a hands-on experience with an Alexander technique teacher is rather magical and mystical because something happens and it takes them outside of their personal experience. And so then they're like, whoa, what just happened? Part of, and I'm giving away, I might be giving away trade secrets a little bit, which is kind of fun, right? This is the secret of how it works. Part of it is that, like, for instance, if I asked all of you to lift your arm, you're going to lift your arm in the way that you lift your arm. In other words, the way that feels normal for you to lift your arm. If I come over and I was at your place and I said, just let your arm relax, and I lifted your arm for you, I have the opportunity to move your arm along a different neural pathway than you would. Okay? Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
I said that once. Okay, all right.
Yeah, I love, thank you.
So, I mean, we can go, I don't know how far you want me to go down the rabbit trail. I can talk also, Elizabeth, for hours. So, but you also wanted a little bit of where and how I started with the Alexander technique, and I'd like to offer a little bit of that. So
I'd love to hear.
Okay, thank you. I finished my schooling, and my husband needed to move from Southern California up to Oregon, and I had two little girls, and I had taken a few years off while they were babies. And then we got to Oregon, and I was like, okay, I want to jump back in. I want to get going, right? And I looked around for something, and we were in Eugene. I'm still in Eugene. And in Corvallis was a workshop at the Oregon State called the Voice Care Network. And I believe they're still going. I don't know if any of you guys know them. They're a wonderful group of people. And they do a combination of, it was like a 5-day intensive on vocal health, also with choral conducting. At the time I was doing church choirs and things like that and conducting. And they had an Alexander technique teacher there to work with us all. And this was my first giant aha moment. I came back from that workshop going, oh my God, what is the Alexander technique? Because it was so far outside of any experience that I had had. And I experimented with it in conducting, and I experimented with it with my singing, and I started playing around with it in my studio with my students. And then I said, okay, I need more than just a workshop. I need a teacher. Where's the nearest teacher? Well, there was no teachers in Eugene. Eugene's fairly small. So the closest big city is Portland. So I went looking up there, and it just so happened that Barbara 𝗂𝘶, who is the author of What Every Musician Needs to Know About the Voice, she co-authored How to Learn the Alexander Technique with her husband, Bill 𝗂𝘶. She is a giant in the Alexander Technique world from the Marjorie Barstow lineage. And she had just moved to Portland, Oregon to be near her daughter and grandchildren. So I went knocking, virtually knocking on her door saying, hey, please, will you teach me? So I spent the next 10 years on and off working with her. I didn't go through a formal Alexander Technique school for 4 years. I didn't have that opportunity. because I ended up solo raising my 2 girls and trying to make a living and all those things. So I did the old school apprenticeship program, which means you just keep going to teachers until they go, okay, I've taught you everything I can teach you. Go on to this teacher. So I spent 8 to 10 years with Barbara, and she, finished her Andover Educators course, but also did straight Alexander Technique work with her. And then I looked around for a new teacher, and I went to Catherine Madden. And she's up in University of Washington. She works primarily with actors and musicians, and I did workshops and courses with her for another 5 or 6 years. Learned an immense amount. She has, I'm sorry I don't have it, I should. She has a wonderful performance book, which I will look up when I have a chance and send the name along. And I worked with Catherine Madden for about 5, 6 years, and then I was ready. I was like, I think I want to take this 100% and do teacher training, which is a whole nother step, and you go through a couple of years of courses and extensive reading of everything F.M. Alexander wrote, which, I mean, some of his volumes are like this wide. They're really big. Into unconscious control of the individual and all these very heady books. So I did that whole training with Catherine Kettrick and David Mills of Alexander Technique International. They're also in Seattle. And wonderful people, just really, really sweet. And I did all my hands-on work with them. And I finished all that in 2016. And since then, I have been doing this interesting combination of voice. I end up doing a lot of rehabilitative work with people. They come in and they're losing their voice for speech or book reading or singing or whatever it is. Or I do workshops, studio workshops, like a voice teacher will say, come work with all my students, all my voice students, and we'll do a workshop here and there around the area and stuff. So that was my pathway.
Wonderful. It's a small world, Marieke, because Kathy Madden will be speaking at the conference that I run with my colleagues at the University of Washington Laryngology Performing Voice Clinic here. So we have a conference in May called the Northwest Voice, the Art and Science, the Performing Voice. There's a shameless little plug that I've never done on a NATS chat before, and Kathy will be speaking at it this year. So that's
absolutely marvelous, really fabulous.
Yeah. She's actually going to lead us through a little workshop to help with performance anxiety. So I'm looking forward to that. Frank Ragsdale, tell us about Laban.
So, like Elizabeth, I am not certified in Laban. I have taken some classes and got certificates, but it's a very, very long process. And for what I use it for, it's not really what I'm wanting to do. So I came to Laban actually when I was at Oklahoma City University. David Herendeen, who's the director of opera and musical theater and a phenomenal creative educator, I asked him to come and do a masterclass for my students, and he introduced Laban. And what he was really using it for was part of what I use it for is the character development. He was trying to get them to look at the character in different ways, think about it in a different way. But as I watched, I noticed how so many of the students would vocally free up, and they would, at the same time as the character work, their technique would actually fall into place into things that we've been working on, but they hadn't quite been able to achieve. So I thought, well, you know what? I think I'm going to start using this. And Laban, of course, he is considered the father of modern dance, and he created a system to actually notate all of dance movements. And I've shown before it's very complicated, and but they still use it in choreography today. However, Laban is used all over disciplines, including psychology and athletics and all many, many disciplines. So obviously people are using it in different ways. So for me, there are 8, well, not for me, but there are 8 words and 8 movements that go along with all of the different work that you would do as a choreographer. So I'm going to show us a video, and just to show those of me demonstrating those movements at this summer at ICBT. So let me get here, make sure I do this right.
And I will just say, as he's pulling that up, as the oh no, did we lose him? Did he
Nope,
pop off?
I'm here.
Oh, there you are. As the videographer of this video, I promise you, I did not film it sideways for a minute. So
I was not going to say anything.
no, God, I'll, it's all right.
I paid a lot of money for this video, so here you go. Please, no judgment.
Really feel that floating into the air, and I like to use the legs because, of course, we forget we have our body.
So this one is float.
Glide. Really feel
Glide. You're going to see the words in a second.
Air. Press, palms down, and just press. And really important that you keep the motion really going, because we want to make sure we're staying released here, released here. Ring, if you're bringing out a rag. A lot of energy. I think Carolyn felt that in the ring, that you have energy yet you don't feel static at all. Dab, like your sponge cleaning. Flick. Slash, lots of energy, slash. And punch. This was a really good one at the NATS. Sorry, you.
So, as you can see, they're very active, and I really am finding more and more, and my colleagues here will probably attest to it as well, that students are very unaware of their body. And it is, of course, what we do is so physical that when I get them to do some of these, they become much more aware of all of the tension they have, how they hardly will move anything, and they start to become more body aware. So I found it to be really helpful in that way.
I should have had you pull up. There's a wonderful video last summer of you working with 𝗏𝘃𝗀 that I show students all the time. I use that video a lot to show them because, I mean, it was just magical to see that work. It was really wonderful. Well, thank you, Frank, for that explanation. So, Matt, bring this all together for us and explain a little bit more about that NATS series books in case people don't know about it.
Sure. Well, I come into this conversation as the editor of the NATS So You Want to Sing series. I was appointed at the end of 2014, and we published the 20th book in that series in 2020, out of coincidence, 20 and 2020. I was not the first editor of that series. Alan Henderson was the brainchild behind the So You Want to Sing series. And his concept was to devote different volumes to genres that voice teachers who came out of traditional curricula and experienced opera, art, song, concert music, when they're confronted with a CCM style or a style that falls outside of the classical realm, volumes were conceived to be in place to help teachers teach those styles. So early volumes had musical theater, rock and roll, jazz, country. So when I took over the series, there was a lot of titles in the pipeline, or ideas we had in the pipeline to cover different genres of music. The So You Want to Sing with Awareness volume was actually an idea of mine, and the reason why I wanted to publish a volume devoted to different modalities is because there were a lot of books and articles out there, Betsy and Sam's book comes to mind, that are devoted to one modality. And that makes sense because for certifying yourself or going in depth on any one of these, it's a huge commitment. So it's unusual for someone to specialize in more than one modality. So my concept was an edited volume where someone could get a taste of these different modalities, and then they could pursue one or more of them in depth if one of them was especially interesting to them. Our problem early on, and the reason why this was the 19th book in the series as opposed to it was one of the initial ideas and one of the last books, is because we were somewhat limited by the Rowman and Littlefield marketing. The So You Want to Sing series was designed to go along with various genres. So you want to sing rock, so you want to sing barbershop. So an opportunity came along to develop this title actually with Brenda Smith, who wrote the So You Want to Sing for a Lifetime book, which allowed us to go beyond genre and find a way that worked with the marketing of the series to explore another topic. Brenda's title, of course, deals with children singing straight through senior citizens singing and singing for an entire lifetime. When that happened, all we needed to do was come up with the title. And I remember being at the Vennard Symposium in 2018, where on the plane there, I came up with this idea, So You Want to Sing with Awareness. And I ran it by Alan, and we liked that idea. And within 2 years, we had that title. It's an edited volume. Some of the chapters, in addition to the modalities we're exploring tonight, we have a Pilates chapter in there by Joan Melton. We have a yoga chapter by Linda Lister. We have a meditation chapter by Shelley DeBryan. We have body mapping, Jan Prokop. So it gives a real taste of all these different modalities under a single cover, which was exactly our intention. Eventually, our desire to explore things beyond genre led to the relationship with NATS and Rowman Littlefield, and now we have the NATS Books imprint, which will allow us to explore anything under the sun. That's a good idea, but it was born out of this So You Want to Sing idea, and going beyond genre to give people some extra tools for them to consider when they're teaching students.
Thank you. And Matt, as the editor of this book in particular, did you know a lot about movement modalities before editing this book? And depending on the answer to that, what is a broad takeaway from you?
Well, I knew about the modalities. Actually, I was introduced to Feldenkrais by my undergraduate voice teacher, 𝗓𝘂𝗲𝗁. She had a course, Feldenkrais for Musicians, and I knew that I wasn't very good at it. I took the course and I realized I had a lot to learn about my body. So beginning as a 19, 20-year-old, I always knew that it was a really interesting and important aspect of pedagogy. So I was curious myself, and it was a real joy to edit these different contributions to learn more about what these techniques, what distinguishes them from one another, and also what they have in common, which is all awareness, becoming more aware of your body and being aware of more ways to communicate in space and be in touch with what's happening physically when you're singing.
Okay. So actually, let's take that to the next step. I'll start with Elizabeth again. Why do you think body awareness and movement, I know this may seem like an obvious question, but I actually want to hear each of you articulate, why do you think that's important in the act of teaching our singers to sing?
I remember I was at the Royal School of Theatre or Music and Dance in Glasgow, Scotland. And a wonderful man named David had just taken over as the director. And I came to interview him as part of an offshoot from my other book, shameless plug here, A Spectrum of Voices, Prominent American Voice Teachers Discuss the Teaching of Singing, which goes back to Richard Miller and Orrin Brown and an amazing number of teachers from the mid to late 20th century and beyond. And I remember him talking about the fact when he came to the school, I'll try and do a British accent, all of the students were singing as if they had their heads on top of plant stands. I just thought that encapsulated it beautifully. So the entire body is the instrument. And we are singers, we are athletes, singing is our sport. That's a quote from my next teacher as a doctoral student. It was Carol Weber. And she recommended The Thinking Body by Mabel Dodd as a Bible to go by. It's a beautiful book published in the 1930s, updated. She really emphasized that you are singing from literally the soles of your feet all the way up to the top of your head. And that was a concept that was new to me, even as a competitive athlete, as I said, in the other sports. I never thought about it for singing because so much emphasis was put on what's going on here, what's going on in the vocal, in the vocal folds. And oh yeah, by the way, breathing. Yeah, there's something going on down there for breathing. I never could figure out how to breathe, because every time I asked somebody, said, well, just, you just breathe. Or, well, what do you think you should do? I don't know. Do I push down or do I suck up? It was never explained to me. And so the concept of the entire body is the instrument. I hate to say it, I was almost 40, 1990. Hello. So yes, that's what why the Feldenkrais method, the way I was brought into it and stumbled upon it, and what it has done for my own singing, but also conveying it to my teachers, the teachers I teach, and also my students, whether they're 8-year-olds all the way up to my oldest student right now is 86. It's a lifelong pursuit.
It's wonderful. And Marieke or Frank, anything to add about why you think, so much of singing, right, is about the cognition and the vocal apparatus itself? But tell me why you think talking about movement on a regular basis in lessons is important.
Frank, do you have a thought or shall I jump?
You go ahead first.
So I'm not sure we're actually talking about movement as much as we're talking about awareness of movement, right? So let's break down for a second the concept of awareness. And this little chunk is from actually the Andover Educators Body Mapping Curriculum Understanding. One of the things that we would teach through that modality is that so many of us have been taught to concentrate, going through school, elementary school, middle school. And by definition of concentrate, we mean narrowing our attention to one specific thing, okay? And kids in school are taught that, little ones, focus on your work, concentrate on your work, block everything else out. Anybody who's been through a school system has had a certain amount of that. And Andover educators started discussing something called inclusive awareness. And the idea is that instead of having a narrow focus of concentration on one thing, okay, I'm singing, this is my sound, or oh, this is my breath, or oh, these are my arms trying to do something or acting, or oh, this is the audience, or oh, what is the piano doing, or oh, which is kind of like taking a concentrated focus and shifting it around to different things. Inclusive awareness is this idea that you broaden out the field of awareness. Think about like your peripheral awareness. If you look at stars or if you're driving, you have the center focus, but then you have this peripheral field. So now imagine if your communication with your audience, with your listeners, was your primary focus, but that you were able to maintain this big peripheral awareness that included all of yourself, all of your breathing, all of your accompanist, supportive music, everything in this bigger bubble. And so few students have that already in their system. It's very rare unless they have some other kind of training modality or experience like 𝗓𝗓 or something like that, that builds that open awareness. But really, in order to be able to have everything integrate together, breath and sound and communication and you know, all those things, the field of awareness for the singer has to be open. It has to, all the peripheral have to be there at the same time they make a main focus. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. That was a really wonderful explanation. And Frank, as I come to you, let me just say to the attendees, please use the question box if you would like to ask any of my guests tonight questions about their modality. Please do so. Go ahead, Frank. Thoughts from you?
Yeah, so it is obviously about body awareness, and that's what I was talking about, that students seem to have less and less body awareness. But it's also, for me, about movement. So when I was doing my doctorate, I took psychology of music, which, Dr. Asmus, I'm so sorry, was the bane of my existence. But one of the things that we talked about and read about was movement in young children and how it helped them learn and memorize. And the bigger the movement, the easier it was for them to do. And I thought, well, let's see if movement can also help them learn some of the things that we're working on technically in a way that may not have been working in the past. So I do see that that happens. Now, what I tell people with this is not teaching you technique. You have to learn how to sing. This is helping you release your technique. And as others say, it also is something that helps get them out of the mode of that super intense concentration that so many of our students have, that they are just almost debilitated because they can't stop thinking about making it perfect, right? So it helps them. Almost every time I ask a student what about the movement did they think helped them, almost everyone the first time will say, oh, it got my mind off of thinking about what I was doing. So that's some of the reasons why I think that that these are so important. All of these, I've taken some Alexander and I have not done Feldenkrais, but I've read about them, is because it helps free the body, but it helps people become aware of the body.
Great segue. Thank you, Frank. There are two questions in the box for Marieke that are similar. So let me ask them both, Marieke. Is there literature that's specific to inclusive awareness for the singer? And also, how do you build inclusive awareness? So this idea of awareness seems to have struck a chord a bit.
Yeah, so there's a book that is the Andover Educator's book called What Every Musician Needs to Know About the Body. And there is a section in there about inclusive awareness. There's games you can play to help build it. Like, for instance, the other day I had a young, like an 18 or 19-year-old musical theater student, and he was very much a concentrator. So I had him close his eyes, and I said, okay, so notice your body, notice where you're sitting, notice, your breathing, start there. And then I said, okay, think about what's behind you, the chair, the wall, the mirror. Think about what is to the left of you, and I described it, to the right of you. Think about what's in front of you. Now think about what's outside of this room. Now think about what's way to the left. There's an ocean out there somewhere. What's way to the south? What's above your head? And in this exercise over a few minutes, first of all, he got really, really relaxed. And he expanded, so he was literally imagining the sky above his head, the center of the earth below his feet, the ocean to the west, the mountains to the east, and just, it took him out of being right here to being, and then I said, okay, now sing, just right there, don't close it down, just sing. And he did, and it was marvelous. And he didn't recognize his own voice, he didn't recognize his own body, he didn't recognize the experience whatsoever. So that would take, you know, a few more experiments around with it before he could become comfortable, because it took him way out of his normal habitual ways of opening his mouth and singing and the things he would focus on. I think that kind of answers that in the sense of what is one way that you can start to build inclusive awareness. The other analogy that I really like is stargazing. You know, that you have rods and cones in your eyes, and I think it's the cones are in the center and they're good for focusing and looking at something directly. And the rods are on the outside and they pick up dimmer images, okay? So if you're looking at the stars, if you look directly at a set of stars or a bunch of stars, you'll see the bright ones with the cones in your eyes. But if you glance off to the side or you look with your peripheral vision, you'll see dim stars because the rods pick up dimmer images with emitting less light than the cones do. So if you want to see all the dim stars, you can't look at them directly. You have to look at them indirectly. So that's another way to play with what is inclusive awareness and what might be a way to find that experience.
Wonderful explanation. So with all the minutia that we as voice teachers have to manage, right? If we're talking classical, we're talking languages and styles and voice technique, right? On and on. And the minutia of the mechanics, how do you incorporate what you're doing? Is it at the beginning of a lesson with people or at the beginning of the work, or do you do the technical work and then bring this in? And do you have an opinion about that? And how do you take the time? You know, how much time of a lesson? Is it every lesson you utilize these modalities? So I'd love to get a visual, a little bit more of a visual of that in your lessons.
So for me, I don't use it every lesson necessarily. It depends on the student and what their real needs are. Some students are much more tense and much less aware of their body. It's usually after they have learned a piece and they are working on it as a I guess as preparing it for a performance. So that's usually when I use it. But I've used it before just in some technical exercises for students that are really bound at that point. So it just kind of depends for me, but not every lesson. And usually it's later in the process of learning a song.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, all of the above. One of the things about the book that we wrote early on, as I said, when Sam and I first started working together, awareness through movement lessons are only half of the Feldenkrais approach. There's also functional integration, which is one-on-one body work. Obviously, that's not what our book is about. Ours is more about the lessons that are taught either with groups or can be applied to a single person. And they're usually 45 to 50 minutes long. Well, nobody's going to do a Feldenkrais lesson and then, oh, by the way, now it's time to start your voice lesson. So I said, we need to shorten these. Well, that was absolutely not the Feldenkrais way. Oh no, we're going to get really slammed. I said, no, this is for singers. We need to be able to have a very short mini Feldenkrais experience that's going to be applied directly to a vocal technical problem. I'll give you an example. So I'm just going to show you really quickly. We broke all the rules and we even made mini ATMs in our book that are about 4 or 5 steps. They take about 5 minutes maximum. One of these instances would be, I would have a student who is singing, I can hear tongue tension. I mean, we voice teachers have very keen ears. Can't see what's going on in there, but I could hear it was really tight. So I said, Mark, we're going to do a mini lesson called Taming the Tongue. And it's requiring just keeping your mouth shut. And you can do this really fast, is you just take your tongue very slowly and you go to the farthest tooth over on the bottom and the left. And you feel what that's like. I guess I'm not going to do it and talk. You feel what that tooth feels like, and then you slowly make your way around the bottom teeth, just exploring what the tooth feels like. And then the next part is you go to the back of the tooth, you feel what that's like, and bring your tongue over, and you make your way around. The full lesson's a little bit longer, but this mini ATM, within 5 minutes, I had him sing again. Beautiful, no tongue tension, absolutely free, stunning. And he looked like he'd just gotten touched with Tinkerbell's fairy dust. It was amazing. So, where am I going with this? Yes, I use them on one-on-one lessons as needed. If I hear or if I see a student who's really rigidly tight, we have, freeing up the head and the neck to turn freely, all kinds of mini ATMs or modularized. We've taken a 45-minute lesson and broken them down into modules of about 6 to 8 minutes. And the nice thing about that is you can send the student home to practice or include one of those modules in their practice session. And the transformative power of movement with attention is a learning experience in itself. And as I said, we also can do a full lesson with a choral rehearsal. Sam used to come to Heidelberg College, now university, where I was full-time, and work with the concert choir right before they went out on tour during spring break. It was an amazing experience to see the fidgety students, and even the director became much more fluid. We videotaped it. I still have those videotapes from 1994 or 5. Anyhow, so yes, full-size lessons done with a group if you have the time, mini ATMs or a module of an ATM as needed in the one-on-one lesson. Works great. And as Feldenkrais said, first you know, then you learn.
I love this. Carolina Botero asks, when a student is brought to their attention to acknowledge body awareness of movement in their singing, can their actual brain capture the right direction of that awareness? And in what ways can we enhance that right direction of awareness?
That's a powerful, evocative question.
So can I input?
Absolutely.
Please.
Take it.
So when you introduce somebody to an experience for the first time, they don't have the neural synapses in their brain connected to retain and be able to duplicate the experience. The time frame of continually bathing them in the new experience in order for those neural synapses to connect so they can track the new information is a minimum of 6 weeks. A minimum of 6 weeks. So if a student has an aha moment in terms of awareness where they're literally, I don't know what just happened to me, but I love the way I sound, you're going to need to revisit over, through the lessons over the next 6 to 8 weeks before it becomes something integrated where their mind has made new connections to be able to track the new information.
That's interesting. That's a very succinct answer to her provocative question.
Yes.
I love that. That's great. We have another one here from Ed Bryant. Are there specific movement exercises to use for, or rather, where does one start with regard to helping students who are stiff or who shake when they sing because they feel they have to help the voice make the vocal sound?
I love the Laban for that.
That's what my first instinct was. I can totally see Frank's work.
Yeah.
I think reason why the Laban can work really well, depending on which ones you use, is because you're trying to really incorporate the whole body. Oftentimes we shake because we're locking the abdominals and therefore locking the system, and being able to do a movement that allows that to free is something that I found can be really helpful. What I usually try to do, and Marieka's right, it's the same, it doesn't matter about movement, right? A singer goes, they try something, they get it right, and they move on. And I'm constantly saying an instrumentalist will go over that again and again and again and again until they can't get it wrong. So it's the same kind of thing with this. And so what I try to do is I'll have them do the movement in a phrase for 3 or 4 times, then I'll ask them to stand there, try to feel like the body is still doing that movement and sing. Then we'll do the movement again to get them back and forth between actually moving like that and standing and singing with still some body.
Thank you. Sorry, Frank, all of a sudden I didn't hear you finish your sentence. Did you finish your sentence?
Did I freeze?
I just wanted to make sure. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Good. Marieke, I wanted to ask you early on, you mentioned hands-on, and I just wanted to ask about in this current climate where there's a lot of conversation about that, do you have a process to handle that?
I do. First of all, I always ask, right? Are you comfortable? Can I come close in? Is it okay if I touch your ribs? Is it okay if I'm gonna, put my hands here or there? I'm always asking, and if I sense the slightest hesitation, then I back off. I can do almost anything just with talking with them that I can do with my hands, but sometimes the hands goes quicker. So if I'm allowed to.
Matt, not to put you on the spot, just want to check in if you have any conversation you want to lead.
Yeah, I wanted to take this question by Micah Patz. He asks, I'm curious if you could elaborate on how movement and body awareness not only helps with technique, but also the performance and acting elements of singing. And he mentions that he's doing his graduate capstone on this topic. That is a big topic because we've been mostly focused on the integration of these with vocal technique, and that's certainly the focus of the book I edited. What comes to mind here, Micah, that might be helpful is the Voice and Speech Trainers Association, VASTA, one of our sister organizations. I'm a member of that organization, and there are so many modalities out there that a legion of brilliant people are working on with integration of performance elements and creative elements with these various techniques. So I'm not an expert on any one of these, but like I said, there are many experts who are very active in that Voice and Speech Trainers organization. So I would encourage you to check out their resources on the website and join the organization. I get several e-blasts, sometimes a day, from that organization with various workshops and online certifications where people are working on this kind of integration with acting elements, performance elements, movement elements on stage. So have fun exploring that.
Great response. Are there any workshops on any of these modalities that are coming up in the summer for teachers that are interested? Or are they year round? Somebody specifically asked about July, which is why I said summer.
For Laban, there are classes, but it's really in learning the movements and the notation system. So it's a little less specific to singing in that way.
The Feldenkrais Guild, it's an international guild of Feldenkrais practitioners, and they do have a website that you can go into to see if there's any Feldenkrais, either awareness through movement lessons that are being conducted by Feldenkrais practitioners, or if there's some open to the public Feldenkrais workshops. I would suggest if you wanted to look in your local area, because Feldenkrais practitioners are all over the world. It's better known in Europe because Feldenkrais was born in the Ukraine, but he went to Israel before it was Israel, and then he studied at the Sorbonne in physics, and then the Nazis invaded Paris. So he escaped to Great Britain and worked with the British Navy on submarines and things like that. When he came back after the war, Israel was declared as now its own country, and the president, David Ben-Gurion, had a stroke. They called in Feldenkrais, and with the Feldenkrais hands-on awareness and movement, but also the functional integration, apparently he cured David Ben-Gurion of his stroke, and that's when Feldenkrais's fame took off. And he came to the United States and did the first classes in Massachusetts and also in the West Coast in San Francisco. So from a very small group of personally trained people, it expanded into this, international and national guild. So that would be my advice. If you're really interested in finding workshops in Feldenkrais, go to the website. It's open to anybody.
Okay. And Melody Rich says that she's training with the Contemporary Alexander School, and she said there are several workshops coming up. So I will say, Melody, if for anybody, please go to the NATS Chat Facebook page if you particularly know of a resource. And for those asking about the books that have been mentioned here, of course, you can watch the replay of NATS Chats, which we always put up on the official NATS YouTube channel, and I post them on the Facebook NATS Chat for Teachers page as well. So I will ask my guests to send me maybe perhaps a list, and I'll post it in the comments on the replay video of this so people have access to that. So I think that would be useful. Are there any last thoughts from any of you about your particular modalities or about movement and what we discussed tonight that you want to make sure our audience considers or thinks about? You've done such a great job.
I'll quote Feldenkrais: what you do, you can imagine, and what you imagine, you can do. Kinesthetic imagination is very powerful. We have several lessons in our book that you do movement on one side and then you imagine at the other side. And routinely, the students I've worked with at many universities have always said the profound effect of the imagination side was evident, more than even doing the movement in real space. So what you can do, you imagine. What you imagine, you can do. Matt?
We have a quotation in the inside cover of So You Want to Sing with Awareness. Awareness is like the sun. When it shines on things, they are transformed.
Wow, that's lovely. That's lovely. Marieke or Frank, I want to give you an opportunity for final thoughts.
I just say don't be afraid to try things. As far as Laban goes, it's really not that high risk, and any of that kind of movement can really help. And so I would just say really try, get your students moving.
Yeah, I would agree. I think as a teacher, if you can experiment around yourself with a few Feldenkrais lessons, a few Alexander Technique lessons, a few Laban. Not everything is for everybody. Everybody fits one or another a little bit more. And the broader your own personal experience is, the more you can offer your students. Yeah.
It's amazing. We never know what one thing is going to just transform somebody's singing or life, or, in a myriad of ways. So it's wonderful that we all have different interests and can guide our students and connect with them. I want to just remind people our March 19th NATS chat will be a balance in the force, producing, perceiving, measuring, and assessing vibrato, with some, as always, when John Nix is on, interesting new research around vibrato. Also, Josh Glasner will join me, Yvonne Gonzalez-Redmond, and Theodora Nestorova. So it should be a wonderful chat March 19th. And as always, please join the Facebook NATS chat page and look for the archive videos, which there are now several years. So thank you, Elizabeth, Matt, Marieke, and Frank, for the generosity of your time. I know I can see that it's hard to really delve in, right? In this amount of time, I can see another NATS chat where, you know, each of you gets to show more of the modality in action. I think that would give us even more of a sense. But I think it's important for us to hear the history of these modalities and how they've impacted you and your students. So thank you so much for joining me and sharing that tonight. And thank you, Frank, for the idea. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Kari.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.